Alright, so doing a video blog. I hope it's better lighting. But so here's the deal. We're gonna talk a little bit about just where we're at in life and what's going on. Just laying like everything on the table. Video blog style. Like really trying to make a connection and shit. I think rule number one is as someone who's doing like a video blog like this, putting any content out there, you can't care about what other people are gonna bash you, say, think of you, whatever. You gotta just care about your own opinion, keep it real with yourself as much as possible, as much as you're willing to actually work on and improve. Otherwise, you're just beating yourself up. So you gotta focus on, what you're willing to do. And I think all that's based on what you want, what you're trying to get in life. I recently went to a holiday work party, and when you reach like a certain age, I'm 29, obviously as you get older, you realize a whole bunch of shit just about people, about yourself, about requirement, necessity, inside and out. A lot of it's culture based, family based, how you were raised. I was raised where, I constantly sought approval and affection and pleasure from like outside. Food, bad eating habits. I was really like spoiled with love by my mom. My dad was super withdrawn. And so you just develop habits of trying to like please or appease the internal baby within, so to speak. If you believe in like, Jung or Freud, or I'm sure like some psychology would say, don't quote me on this, but at least, my own personal theory is that, there are stages and levels of, consciousness, awarenesses, baby, toddler, teen, young adult, and maybe stages and levels of, arrested development that we're at. But I think through it all, part of becoming a full-blown adult is, at least for me, learning ways of like self-soothing and, obviously developing good like habits and patterns and ways of being. I think that's a lot of what life's about. Everything seems to be about relation, whether to the self or to others. So we're covering a lot. I'm well aware of that, but kind of all over the map, all over the place. But I think something that like is significant and poignant, at least to worth mentioning, is I was at this holiday party, and I had been to a company holiday party like a couple years before, and I was kind of like an open book, and just just exposed, a sword, like an open sword, just exposed to the point where, like, if there's some shit that I'm dealing with or that I'm not able to process correctly, or something's going the way I didn't expect it, or someone's not there to like proverbially catch me, so to speak, like in a conversation or something, then it kind of like jolts the system. Whereas now, this year around, if I have an internal something to hold on to, whether it be a word or a mantra, some would say a defense mechanism or something, but it's there, it's stable, it's stability. It's almost like an anchor of self. So I think a part of growing up is just realizing and noticing um, that you're able to provide this sense of centeredness for the self, and you don't have to rely on others to do so. Um, I think when I think what's ingrained in just beings in general, any form of being, animals, people, there's always a sense of uh, looking towards something. We're based on looking externally for signs and signals and cues and things like this. And we're constantly looking for green lights, red lights, yellow lights, stop signs, signs to go, continue, stop, or, left turn, right turn. I think just as organisms. And I think a part of that is obviously being born, being a child. You're always looking to the adult. You're always looking towards something for an answer, or for it's how we survive. And what I have started developing recently, or at least what I think I've been starting to develop recently, is that sort of sense of, that self soothing sense, or looking to the self is what I call it. So, and, you could call it like a mind trick or a mind game or something, but I think what it really is it is like a shield, or keeping your guard up. But I think to some extent it's necessary. I think it's a necessary item. There's a necessity for stability and strength in the world. And I think that people are being raised to constantly look outside of themselves for this, whatever is needed, whether it's internal strength, durability, happiness, love, etc. When really, if you consider the mind like some sort of open source program, we could program ourselves for all of these things. But I think the problem is that we're constantly, like I said, going back to the model of looking outside of ourselves. We're looking at all this external programming, and all this external programming has us believing that we're going to get what we want and need outside of ourselves. When really, truly, that's not possible at all. Because all we have is inside, right now. You could have objectives and goals and things that you wish to attain, and you could attain them outside. But for all intents and purposes, once you achieve that goal, for example, as we saw with Tyson Fury, when he won the heavyweight belts in 2015, and he threw it all away. He was at the top of the game, but he realized that achieving his entire goal of being the greatest boxer in the world, it was not gonna fulfill his life. Life is an ongoing process that you have to till and farm and maintain and cut the weeds and purge and replenish and all these things. So you're maintaining this balance, this harmony, this ecosystem. Now we know this, but it's kind of tricky when you bring in your personal ego, when you bring in your upbringing, when you're bringing in all the bad habits that you learned and acquired from your childhood, all your expectations of life, when you quote unquote get out into the real world, and maybe for some there is that real world that they come across. I can only speak for myself, but I relocated to LA from Chicago, and you do get this sense of like, oh wow, people are being pretty bogus. Like they're not just being good, nice people. like you thought about, like you were taught about, like you were raised about, that you learned and knew how to be. You start to get a sense that, okay, maybe this is just my internal thing, my internal game. Don't get me wrong, there are good and nice people out there, but I do think that there's a lot of psychic battling, a lot of egoisms, and I think a lot of it is raised on the zeitgeist of society, which, some could argue is famine based, meaning that there's not enough to go around. We can't all live happy, healthy lives. Again, we need these external pleasures or experiences, and don't get me wrong, I'm all for experiencing life and such, but in America, in the US, there's this constant achievement mentality and this global, capitalism, I guess, to, succeed, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve. When really, I think a lot of like Eastern spiritualisms or, whatever forms of spiritualisms would have it that, you could paradoxically achieve and attain outside, but still be happy, whole, and complete inside. So I guess just how it ties to, for instance, being at like a social event, like a social party, is I think people, depending on what they want, what they desire, what their intentions are, they're constantly looking for something and looking towards people, towards others, which is fine. It's all well and good, but I guess when you're, conscious about it or aware of, what's going on, and I think that comes from, like I said, getting older. I think that just kind of puts a whole new spin on reality. And so it's all very interesting. I notice a lot of people are in like social groups and, they keep in their cliques and they're not like floating about and, talking to everybody. And, me, I was talking to everybody. Now that could be interpreted as a negative thing or a good thing, meaning I don't have a clique to belong to, or I get along with everybody, or, so. But obviously, since I'm for myself, first and foremost, I'm going to interpret it in the best way possible. I think that's a personal power that a lot of people aren't realizing, is that they got to give themselves the benefit of the doubt and the courtesy and the power and the strength to put a good narrative on reality for themselves, so as to keep them strong, so as to allow themselves, and thus allowing themselves to be strong for others. I think now this could happen in, good or bad ways. You could be a bad person or you could be a good person, whatever that means to you. When I say a good person, I think it's pretty clear. Societal rules and guidelines that we abide by and live by. Not doing harm to others, not stealing, not breaking any laws for the most part. So, and I think we could all agree to that, and we're all sensible. Those who are capable of being sensible are. But yeah, I don't know. I just think when you have like a defense, and so again, to go back, some people might be saying like defense mechanism, you're not being honest or you're not making a connection, or but I think sometimes you got to do both. Sometimes a good offense is a good defense. And I think, having that centeredness, we could call it, whether it's you keep a word or a mantra when you feel uncomfortable or like shaken up, you know, to go to, it allows you to take people's best shots and, kind of exposes their intentions. So, excuse me, that's fine too. And I think it's like a refining, purification process in that I think it allows others to see themselves as well. So, I don't know. There's a lot to chew on there. There's a lot to think about. There are thoughtful, caring, mindful people out in the world. I would fancy myself to be one of them. Good, cool people that are on this journey with you. And again, if you're constantly, using poor coping mechanisms or whatever, or thinking that someone else is going to make you happy or fulfill yourself, or whether it be a girlfriend or a boyfriend or, a goal or money, like I said, those things are good to achieve for and work towards and aspire towards. But while you're on the journey there, just remember to, know that you're already complete, you're already whole, and you're good and all that stuff. Or whatever it is that you need, it's, in some way, shape, or form, it's kind of like already within you. When you're strong and you're able to, be that which you need, say if it's love, for instance, if you're able to be loving, or love yourself. My journey, I think, consisted of with, learning to love myself or soothe myself. And I think that's a respectable, honorable quality. It's a lovable quality when you take care of yourself and love yourself. Even if it's just talking to yourself inside your head and reassuring yourself. Like, I love myself, I care about myself. Like, that's a tangible thing. It's like a self-soothing. It's like singing to yourself or feeding yourself or, washing yourself or something. It's just, I think in some ways it might be easy to not recognize what these things really are, playing music or singing or, exercising, But yeah, I don't know. I just think it allows you to, with this mental defense mechanism or mantra or word or however you want to look at it, it allows you to get through life. And then maybe, eventually becomes a part of you and you don't need it as much. Or maybe you could find things that keep you honest and pure and present. That's always a good thing. I advocate for, being present more than anything. But I do think that, maybe we're evolving as people away from, doing some sort of like psychic warfare or trying to assert our realities over each other or label others, or, we do have, relationships with each other. So I think to claim that there's no like ego jockeying back and forth, I would say it's foolish to claim something like that. But I don't know, it's a journey, it's a process. I feel good about it. It feels good to be able to talk and kind of just like put everything out there on the table, and maybe others could, benefit from it. And just use it, for a good direction. And I think, the only way that you're able to really do that is because you're confident and secure in just being a positive, good person. And I think, eventually, no matter, like, when you learn this, it's like we have to all be rooting for each other. Like the whole planet, like everybody on the planet needs to be like rooting for each other and on each other's team. So I think, if I had to light a fire and, spread it wildfire style, that would be the fire that I would light, because it's a good one, it's a positive one. And yeah, so there's that. Trying to think, there's a lot of stuff. I'm currently thinking about Jordan Peterson and how he says to, clean up your house and take care of yourself and like clean and pick up after yourself and get your life organized and have a goal. And it's kind of like it's like a very like cold, direct, military-esque kind of way of communicating it, but I do understand the value in what he's saying. But I think in order to do that, you gotta be in a healthy state enough to recognize that you're doing these things for yourself because they're good for you, and you are worth being loved and cared for and having a great life. And so I think a lot of what he's talking about and a lot of what I'm talking about are hand in hand related, if not one and the same. I think a lot of people struggle with like self-worth or making a connection to the self. And a lot of people have inherited negative coping mechanisms and habits like drinking and smoking and whatever, drugs. But I think if you're cognizant of this and aware of it, then I think you could sire and oversee and in a way, start to push these negative things away from your life. So I don't know what else is there to talk about. It's been a good 20 minutes. But yeah, I don't know. I think like to wrap up the whole like when people look towards you, people usually want like a message, like a genuine something. I think unconsciously, that's why we look to someone to say it's okay or something. I think that's really what we're doing. So, may it always be a comforting, reassuring message of, we're good, things are okay. And I think that helps create a peaceful reality environment. And all that good stuff. So it's all built in, it's all within you. You've inherited all this genetic information and socialization and all this stuff, and you just gotta put yourself out there and trust and fly. And come out the spiritual closet, so to speak. Because I do think that that's a lot of what's going on, is that like we're inhibiting ourselves from making like some sort of like connection with the extent of our reality, in all of its incarnations and manifestations. I do think there's that significant spiritual component, and I think it's like a belief in energies and intention and trying to play out this reality in the best way possible, and keeping things balanced and for the greater good. that's what spirituality might be to me, and a lot of trust and a lot of faith to keep going, inside and out. There's a God inside me and there's a God outside of me. Type. Even if the God outside of me is just higher society and the collective zeitgeist, collective unconscious. So, really think about it. If you have questions or whatever, be nice, ask. We could talk about it. I think it's really cool that we have this technology available to us. And, love and light to you all, to myself, inside and out, all good things. Healthy, happy, peaceful, pura vida. All good. Love you guys. Bye.